questions that have not been answered, very disturbing questions, especially when you look at them from a contextual standpoint. I can point out one thing in particular, the 9/11 Commission. Not one word in the 9/11 Commission report about the collapse of Building 7. As a matter of fact, during court proceedings dealing with the NYC Can petition, I believe the judge who is presiding over the matter, his name is Judge Lerner, when Building 7 was brought up in the courtroom, he said, "Building what?" He didn't even know what Building 7 was or how it related to 9/11. I'm not sure if he knew that it collapsed that day. Now, you know, any report or investigation that purports to be a full accounting of the events surrounding the day and on the day of 9/11 should clearly have addressed at least a couple paragraphs to the collapse of Building 7. But there was no mention of it whatsoever, and that's just one particular item. I mean, 70% of the questions proposed by the victims' family members during the 9/11 Commission were completely ignored. So that fact alone, I think, begs for a real investigation into the matter. You also have 60% of the commission members at this point who have said something to the effect that the investigation was thwarted, that their attempts to investigate were blocked, that they were lied to by the government and by the CIA. They used every word except the word cover-up, basically, and one or two of them may have even used that word as well. So when you have all of these people dissenting from the validity of the 9/11 Commission report, even 60% of its own members, the people who sat on the commission, I mean, what else can you do but reinvestigate, or maybe investigate properly for the first time?
What questions do you specifically want answered?
I would like to see someone address the peer-reviewed scientific work done by Dr. Stephen Jones and Danish scientist Niels Harrit on their findings of thermitic residue found in separate dust samples collected from Ground Zero. That's a big question. That's a recent development, but it raises very disturbing questions. If they're finding unexploded nanothermite in dust samples collected from Ground Zero, and if in the NIST report they admit that the steel collected from Ground Zero was never tested for explosive residues, then and as well, the NIST report also, or the FEMA report, denies the occurrence of blast events happening inside Building 7, for instance, at all. I would like to see the theory of controlled demolition as it applies to the collapse of Towers 1, 2, and 7, given a fair and honest assessment by credible experts from both sides of the fence, but it would be great to have it done within the context of a subpoena-powered investigation where the public could be confident in the answers garnered from such an investigation.
The city says that the focus of this referendum is not a proper subject to be placed before the voters under applicable law.
Well, 80,000 New Yorkers seem to think that it is an appropriate subject for us to vote upon, and since we are the ones asking to be able to vote on it, who are they to tell us that it is not appropriate for us to have that choice or that option? That's an argument that makes absolutely no sense.
I've also heard you say that if there was a new investigation, the jig would be up. Mm-hmm. It seems to me like you have your own story or your own understanding of what happened.
I think that I do. I mean, clearly I'm not a structural or an architect, a structural engineer or an expert in physics. I'm an actor. But in preparation for my role on Rescue Me, where I play a post-9/11 New York City firefighter, I did a lot of research and investigation into the events surrounding September 11th. I was here in New York on September 11th. And no matter from which angle I approach the day and the events of the day, or the events leading up to the day of September 11th, it just devolves into contradictions, things that just don't make really any sense now that I'm looking back at the event with, I guess, fresh eyes, so to speak. So, whether you're talking about circumvented protocols, blocked investigations, war games that were being run on September 11th, which made it impossible for the military to respond in time to the hijackings, Whether you're talking about the questions surrounding what really hit the Pentagon, was it Flight 77? Was it a missile? If it wasn't Flight 77, what happened to the people on Flight 77? I mean, there's so many unanswered questions, and I think that contextually, what it points to, especially, I think the most damning as evidence for me is, again, I'll bring it up, the thermitic residues found at Ground Zero. That's something that's really tough to explain away. And what it would suggest, I mean, did 19 guys with box cutters taking orders from a man hiding in a cave in Afghanistan really have access to the buildings to wire them to explode and to come down the way that they did? I mean, NIST has admitted now, under duress, but finally they have admitted that Building 7 experienced 105 feet of free fall speed, meaning you drop a tennis ball from the top of Building 7 and it would hit the ground at the same time that the roof of the structure would have hit the ground. There's only one way that can happen. I mean, a building collapsing into the path of greatest resistance, into its own mass, but hitting the ground at the same time as a free-falling object, that means that there was mass moved out of the way. That means that the fall, something was accelerating that, something was helping that. The only way to do that is with bombs, and who put them there?
Do you think 9/11 was an inside job?
I think it was an inside job.
You do?
Look, in the aftermath of 9/11, we were told that we were attacked by Islamic radicalists who hated America because we were free, essentially. That was their basic explanation for what happened on the day. That, even on the day, didn't really seem to make a whole lot of sense to me. However, in the course of my own investigations into 9/11, I came across Project for a New American Century's document called Rebuilding America's Defenses, in which they lay out basically a plan for establishing, American hegemony going into the next 3 or 4 decades. And they say at the end of the document that a new Pearl Harbor would advance and expedite that agenda. This is a year before 9/11. After 9/11, you have the unfolding of that very same agenda. 9/11 could arguably have been that new Pearl Harbor event which they invoked, which they themselves said would help them expedite their plans and their agenda. So this is an issue that should concern all Americans, because if 9/11 was indeed an inside job, it just puts things in an entirely new context.
On your show Rescue Me, you play a firefighter living his life post 9/11. Has there ever been a point where somebody on the job has asked you to possibly tone down your public opinion about September 11th?
Not with those words or those concerns. Nobody has ever come to me and kind of pulled me aside and said, "Hey, Daniel, you might want to tone it down. There could be maybe some blowback from this." And so far, I haven't experienced any appreciable blowback. The same commentator from Fox and Friends who called Charlie Sheen a Nazi and called him crazy also did the same to me when Rescue Me included 9/11 Truth as a subplot in this past season, due to, I think, largely due to my lobbying the creators of the show on behalf of the subject matter and saying that this is the proper venue in which to address it. Greg Gutfield on Fox and Friends responded by calling me a Nazi, saying that I was insane. Again, not addressing any of the substantive points that I put forth through my character as Franco. So I don't know. At this point, I'm not really as concerned about the backlash for speaking out as I am about the consequences of remaining silent.
Say hypothetically this referendum does get put on the mayoral ballot in November. How can an impartial investigation be created to look into September 11th without any politics playing a role?
Well, the human element included in any kind of bureaucracy or bureaucratic process invariably muddies the waters. It probably wouldn't be a perfect process. I'm sure that it would be, subject to some just criticism and would receive a lot of it from all sides, probably. You're never going to make everybody happy. But if we could just, let's say, start with the goal of answering 40% or 50% or 55% of the questions of the people who lost loved ones on 9/11 and just make that our only focus, regardless, politics aside, that'd be a great place to start.
You've also said that while most questions surrounding 9/11 have not been answered, officials still send us off to kill and be killed in the name of freedom and democracy.
And their unending war of terror, while they send citizens of this country into foreign lands to advance a shamelessly transparent geostrategic
Now, these comments
agenda.
come to light as America is about to mark the 8th anniversary of the war in Afghanistan. Do you believe that's a war based on lies?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I feel that way. I mean, if you look at who benefited from 9/11, it certainly wasn't the 19 hijackers or, Osama bin Laden. Again, Project for a New American Century writes that document, they get their new Pearl Harbor, and then it's basically open season on the Middle East. And not only that, but you have simultaneously the drastic curtailing of civil liberties here on American soil with the passage of the Patriot Act and the Military Commissions Act and Homegrown Terrorism and Prevention Act, all of which contain lots of language which strips us of our civil rights. We no longer have habeas corpus. So 9/11 has served to basically solidify the grip of control of the American people here at home, and has opened the door to unending war around the world. At least that's what it has seemed to do. So it has benefited defense contractors, weapons manufacturers, people in the oil industry. These are the people who have benefited from 9/11.